Hi Year 13s, in this video we're looking at trigonometry transformations, and the first one we've got here is if we've got a coefficient in front of our trig function, it alters the amplitude, so that's the height here. So it's a multiplication effect. If a is smaller than 1, then it's going to be shrinking the graph, and if a is bigger than 1, then it's going to be making the graph taller at both ends. We also have the multiplication of the angle by a constant, and that just squishes it all up. So if it's usually like this, if you times it by 2, you're going to be able to fit 2 in the same distance as you usually do. Likewise, if you multiply it by a fraction, you're going to be stretching it out. If you just add a constant, the same thing happens to adding a constant to any graph. You just shift it up by that constant, and if you add a constant to the angle, you're just transforming it left or right. So if it's positive, you're transforming it left, and if it's negative, you're transforming it right. Anyway, let's look at an example and see how we get on. So this is asking us to graph y equals 2 sine x minus 1. So what I'm going to do to start off with is just sketch in the normal graph of sine. So we'll make this 1 and 2, make this -1 and -2, and so the normal graph of sine would look like this. It would just come up to 1 and then come down and back again and cycle through like that. Okay, now if I'm putting this 2 in front, what I'm doing is stretching the height. So what I'll do is I'll select this graph here, and we'll stretch the height until it has an amplitude of 2. So I've got to stretch it in both directions, and so there it has a maximum and minimum of 2. And then we've got to apply what subtracting a constant does, and in this case it's going to shift it down 1. So let's select that again, and we'll just shift that down 1. So let me select that graph. It's actually the hardest bit to do. Okay, here we go. So we're going to shift it down 1, and there it is. That's our graph shifted down by 1. And so you can see that its maximum is now at 1, its minimum is at -3, but it still cycles through that same pattern that it did before as well. Okay, so you've got to visualize that in your head before you draw it, of course, because hardly any of you have a Surface Pro 3, but that is basically the transformations of a graph. So work through exercise 5.02 and 5.03, and as always, just skip on through to the last few questions if you're finding those first ones easy, and just tick off your progression so I know whereabouts you're up to. Thank you.